about both of you and not as a way to validate your sexuality and your desires, but really about bringing both for both of you. And I know a lot of women who don't want to do oral sex for a variety of reasons, which I hope we can help break some of that.
You're listening to Get Your Marriage On, the fun and spicy podcast bringing you new tools and fresh ideas so that you can be the sexiest couple you know.
Hello, everyone, and welcome. This is episode number 69. Woohoo! And in honor of everyone's favorite two-digit sexy number, I thought we'd have some fun and do an episode all about oral sex. The best sex is intimate sex. And if you have the right mindset, oral sex can be very intimate, leading to deep connection and relationship satisfaction. There is something very intimate about opening your heart and letting yourself be known to your special someone in this way. From a practical standpoint, too, oral sex is very pleasurable, which we'll also talk about in this episode. And as Dr. Ian Kerner, an American sex educator, once said, when it comes to pleasuring a woman, the tongue is mightier than the sword. And you can probably guess what he meant by the sword in that context. Anyway, my friend Amanda Lauder is returning to join me in this fun episode and discussion today. If you're not familiar with Amanda, she's a certified life coach and coaches women on embracing their sexuality as a part of their wholeness. She's also the host of the amazing Sex for Saints podcast. Amanda, welcome to the podcast today, and congratulations for being the guest for episode number 69.
Woohoo! I'm so excited, Dan. Thanks for having me.
Is this kind of fun? We got to talk about oral sex today.
I am so excited. This is one of my favorite topics.
Very good. Very good. So, as a kid, I remember, hearing about people French kissing, and I think, gross, you want to put your tongue in their mouth or whatever? And that was kind of like a gross idea. But then, as I get a little older, more mature and, experience a little bit, hey, that's kind of passionate kissing is really exciting. So I wonder I hope today our listeners listening to this kind of get a little more understanding, more comfortable with the idea of oral sex and how wonderful it can be.
Yeah. And like you pointed out, I think French kissing and oral sex can kind of have that same thing. Like we have that initial ew, what? You want to do what? But then you realize how good it actually is and you're on board.
Right. Yeah. But it takes a little bit of comfort to the idea. So
yes.
So why would anyone even consider, let's start at the beginning. Why would anyone consider just even oral sex in their marriage?
Because it feels good, and pleasure alone is a good enough reason to do it. But other than that, I would say oral sex is one of the most intimate acts that we can do. It's all about really giving to your partner. And the giver isn't necessarily getting anything out of it physically. So if you're in the right mindset, and that's an important piece, you are truly doing it from a loving and generous place. And it's also amazing to be the receiver and to be able to sit back and relax and enjoy the pleasure and your partner's attention and love. But again, you have to be in the right mindset for it.
Right. Which we'll talk about today, I'm sure. Yeah.
Yes.
One of my favorite authors in the marriage space, his name is Dr. David Schnarch. One of his books, Intimacy and Desire, has a whole appendix on how oral sex can be very intimate. Because his whole thing is about intimacy for knowing and being known. And
yes.
So when you mentioned that's what I thought about. It is a very intimate act. It's really letting someone in close to you to know you at a deep level.
Fully known and exposed, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Right. And some might say it's even more intimate than intercourse.
I would agree with that in a lot of respects. Yes.
So any other benefits to why one would want to consider oral sex?
Yeah, I think for both men and women, it is direct and concentrated stimulation to those pleasure organs, the penis and the clitoris, which is the most reliable way to orgasm. So I think that is one of the biggest benefits of why you can do that.
Gotcha. There's also something about feeling a little naughty or grown up or
Maybe.
There's a
Yeah.
very erotic component to that too, I gotta admit.
I think so too. I think so too. Although I think, especially for me in the beginning, I had a hard time with it because I associated it with people like so I went to high school back east. And there were a lot of teenagers of my peers that were having sex before marriage. And I overheard girls many times in just conversation like, yeah, he wanted me to have sex with him. I wouldn't. So I just gave him a blowjob.
Uh-huh.
And I'm like, I just didn't equate. I was like, so a blowjob is less than sex. And like, it didn't ring true to me for a long time. Like I really struggled with it for a long time because I saw it as like this lesser form rather than a more intimate form. Like, and I really think it just depends on the mindset around it. But it took me a little bit to come to that, conclusion that really it is way more intimate than even penetration and intercourse.
Right. So I want to talk a little bit more about the stigma around oral sex. Like you just brought it up, like in high school, like,
yeah,
I will just give him a blowjob instead of whatever. Like, what other stigmas do people run into that you've seen in your coaching, whatever, that really get in the way of adopting a more positive view of oral sex?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest ones I hear from women is that they feel like it's demeaning.
Okay.
And that it's something that they are doing that's, being forced on them or pressured on them, or like because it's all about him and nothing about her, or even like the position can seem demeaning. So I think that's one of the biggest things that I've had to overcome with a lot of my clients is that it is only demeaning if you think about it that way.
Right.
And that's where that mindset piece comes in, because it doesn't need to be demeaning at all. It can be, absolutely, but it doesn't need to be at all.
How about maybe a conservative upbringing where intercourse is the only legitimate way to enjoy sexuality?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think, we kind of are taught and cultured to believe that intercourse is the pinnacle and other things are less than. And I think that's not true. I think intercourse is just one part of a great sexual experience, and there can be so much more that can be incorporated that really draw that intimacy and that connection and that pleasure in so many other ways.
Right. And if your goal is connection and pleasure, sometimes intercourse isn't the most pleasurable way for both people.
Well, for most women, it is not.
Right.
So that's really, really overcoming that stigma that is the way to have sex is a big part of it. And I think oral sex can be one of those things that can be the whole event, or it can just be part of it. It's just one of those things that you can add into your repertoire that can really help create more pleasure and connection, which is the whole goal of sex, right?
Absolutely. I remember a friend telling me kind of sheepishly that the only way his wife can reach climax is by him giving her oral sex. And he always was ashamed of that. He wished, because he took it upon him, like he probably wasn't manly enough or big enough or long enough or something,
right?
Why she couldn't reach, have an orgasm through, regular intercourse. And I think part of it is just misunderstanding of anatomy, how our bodies work. And one is not better than or less than the other. It's no,
it's all, again, I think we make orgasm the goal. And instead of making it just a part of this relationship, that's the whole purpose of sex is connection and pleasure. So taking orgasm off the table, although we do like orgasms,
right.
But taking that as the goal off the table and just pleasure and connection as the goal. And then that can be reached in so many ways, including both oral sex for him and her.
I like that too, because there are many times when I've had sex where there was no orgasm, but it was still really connecting and pleasurable and memorable too. So it doesn't have to, like, orgasm is nice, but I like what you said. We don't want to put that as the standard for good sex or not. It's bigger than that.
Absolutely. I actually had a client recently whose husband was diagnosed with prostate cancer.
Uh-huh.
And she was really concerned about what that would do to their sexual relationship because he was going to have surgery. And at least for 3 months, he was not allowed to have an orgasm, or maybe couldn't.
Uh-huh.
And it could be permanently damaged. And him being able to have an erection and an orgasm that way could be permanently damaged. So penetration was going to be off the table. And, we talked about opening up that definition of sex and including other things.
Uh-huh.
And I'm like, and I don't mean this crass or anything, but like lesbians have really good sex and there is no penis involved.
That's right. Uh-huh. Right.
So just like saying that to her really opened up her mind, like, oh, wait, there can be way more ways for us to experience pleasure and connection and intimacy without him having an erection or having an orgasm or penetration. Like we can just open up some more. And I think oral sex can be a big part of that when we are thinking about opening up that definition and what connection and pleasure can actually be.
Great. I want to switch gears a little bit. I think some of the people listening to this are probably like, finally, an oral sex episode. I can't wait for my spouse to download and listen to this. I want him to hear it. I want her to hear it. Because this is something I've always wanted to do, but he or she is totally against it. But finally, we have this episode. She's going to listen to it. And now all of a sudden she's going to want to do it.
Yeah. Good luck with that.
Yeah, exactly. By the way, if that's your case, please do not,
we are not condoning that.
No, don't tell your spouse to go down and listen to this. If you think that this will be the end all be able to change your mind.
No.
Because of the pressure. And I think that's one of the problems. Like the higher desire spouse for oral sex puts a lot of pressure on the lower desire spouse to do something he or she doesn't want to do. How do you coach couples with that? How would you coach the higher desire spouse listening to this? That?
Well, one, I want to validate that they want this. This is a good thing in a marriage. And I think, tuning into what your sexuality wants is a good thing. Needing your partner to validate that for you is not. And so I think there's appropriate pressure and then there's inappropriate pressure. So are you approaching this in a way like, I would like this for us, and so that it can be great for both of us? How do you feel? Versus like, I need you to do this for me.
Yes.
And, making it about both of you and not as a way to validate your sexuality and your desires, but really about bringing both for both of you. And I know a lot of women who don't want to do oral sex for a variety of reasons, which I hope we can help break some of that. But, for many women, they're like, never, or birthdays and anniversary only, or whatever. And I'm like, and for those women, I would say, open up your mind a little bit. We're going to talk some more, I think, about different things that we can do to help mitigate some of those struggles that you have. But I don't think we need to be pressuring our partners to be doing things that they really don't want to do. That's actually going to make things worse, not better.
It's going to build resentment in your relationship.
Absolutely.
That's not the kind of loving marriage you probably want if you keep at that.
And, each person is allowed to have their boundaries when it comes to sex, what they're willing to do, what they're not willing to do. And if it's a firm no, then you need to respect that. Absolutely. And I mean, I like to think of it kind of like a Venn diagram where you've got two circles, like, one partner has things that they want to do and the other partner has things that they want to do. And you spend a little bit of time in each circle, but where you spend the most amount of time is where those two circles overlap. So that, you're both being fulfilled in that sexual relationship.
That's good. Now, how would you coach the lower desire spouse if they're listening to this and they're like, I need help because my spouse is always coming to me asking for this. And I feel really stuck because I love him or her and I want to, but like, I feel really like, but I don't want to. Give me advice. What do I say?
Well, I would first ask them why and really get to the heart of the matter. Because if you can understand why you really don't like it or don't want to, we can usually find a way through. So, if you're just saying, nope, not going to do it, not even going to try it, and you're not giving yourself the understanding of why that actually is, then we're not going to find a way through. Now, I will say, if there has been like abuse or trauma, it's a hard stop.
Yes.
We're not even going to pursue that because we don't want to bring up trauma responses and have it be even worse. But if it's, something like, I don't like the smell, I don't like the taste, it feels demeaning, I don't know how, confidence, or like, I'm afraid of gagging, I don't want him to finish in my mouth, I don't want to swallow, like all of that, we can totally work through.
Okay, great. Good. All right. So let's talk for the rest, for the next chunk of our conversation today about some of the common objections people might have to.
Yeah.
And I kind of put them in 4 categories: a wife that won't give, and a husband that won't give, and a wife that won't receive, and a husband that won't receive.
Mm-hmm.
What are some of the common reasons why they wouldn't want to give or receive?
Well, I mean, I mentioned just some of them, but we can go into them a little bit more. I think the biggest one that a lot of people have is smells and tastes.
Okay. Yeah. It's the gross factor, right?
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Sex has a smell. Our bodily fluids have a taste. And I think we are conditioned to believe that they're bad. And I don't necessarily think they're bad. I just think they're different. Mm-hmm. So if, a lot of this has to do with the conditioning that we've received just about our bodies in general, our genitals in general, and things that come from those areas. We're just conditioned from the time we're babies to believe that it's bad. So I heard something once about this. There's a difference between, like, you have a baby and they need a diaper change. And you say, oh, you stink, let's change your diaper, versus I smell poop, let's change your diaper. Very different. And it's going to condition them very differently. Like, okay, yes, there's something here that we need to change and get off your body. But like when you say, ooh, you stink, that changes the connotation. Like something that's coming from their body is gross, and therefore their body is gross. It changes the whole way that we look at things. Mm-hmm. So when we can start to untangle these belief systems that we have about our body, then we can start to untangle some of that smell and that taste. Just knowing that, like, they're not necessarily bad, they're just different. Our bodies are good. They were created in the image of God. So anything that comes from them is inherently good as well. But if you can't get there, there are also some tips and tricks I like to add in to help with that. First is be freshly showered. So
that helps a lot.
It helps a lot to mitigate some of those smells and tastes. Or another thing is to do it in the shower. All right. When you're in the shower, then a lot of those smells and tastes are mitigated as well.
And there's plenty of water to help wash things away.
Wash things away. Yes. And you really have a harder time smelling too in the shower, just because you have other things going on. There are great companies that make products that help with smell and taste as well. And then, there's flavored lubes that can help. We do need to be a little bit careful about flavored lubes though, because they usually have sugar, honey, or glycerin in them. And if that gets inside the vagina, it can cause yeast infections. So if you're using those for any sort of oral, make sure it gets fully washed off and doesn't get in the vagina. There's also some things called dental dams. It's a protective barrier, so they can still have feeling, but you don't get the smell and taste as well. So, and those can just be found like on Amazon or different places. So those are some kind of mitigations for the smell and taste. If you can't quite get to like our bodies are good and everything that comes from them is good. But women also need to know that, most men like the taste of their wives.
Yeah.
We've been conditioned to not think that it's gross, but men tend to like it. A lot of men describe their wives tasting very sweet.
or
what
tangy
or tangy,
yeah,
yes, and
it's
or
like a unique taste that
it is unique, right? But it can
it's kind of
also
endearing.
change depending on the time of day, depending on the time of month, depending on what you eat. So being sensitive to all of those things can also help.
I have a friend that posted on Facebook a few years ago, for Christmas, he unwrapped 2 cans of pineapple juice under the Christmas tree. And the rest of the family's like, what's the big deal? But for him, he knew what that meant.
Yes.
By
And if
him-
you don't know what that means, pineapples are one of the things that are supposed to be able to change the taste of a woman's
or of the man
taste.
in this case, right?
Oh, yeah, and
Yeah.
men too. Yes.
Yep. Uh-huh.
Yep. So, just a little
Makes it a little
Some-
sweeter, I guess.
makes it a little sweeter, I guess. Okay. Let's see, the next one. Wife that won't.
I have one more tip on
Yes.
the on the hygiene part.
Yes.
Sometimes trimming your pubic hair, you don't need to like be completely shaved, but like trimming it back helps a lot with odor control too. So that's a tip.
That's great.
It
Great
can be
tip.
a fun part of foreplay too, if you want to give each other a little trim.
Yes, I actually just had a podcast on waxing for women.
Okay. Nice.
So that getting rid of the hair can help with the smell and taste too.
Mhm.
Yes. Okay. So wife that won't give, husband will give. So that the smell and taste is one. Worrying about gagging. So we don't have to deep throat women. You can if you want to.
Just to be clear, this is for the woman taking the man's penis into her mouth.
Yes.
Yeah.
There are some women who gag very easily. So you don't have to go that far. Most of the pleasure is on the head anyway.
Uh-huh.
So, some men like it, but you don't have to. There are also products that you can use. You can use your hand to just keep from going too deep. Or there's products like O-Nut that has 4 interlocking rings that you can put around the penis so that you don't go deep as well.
Great. We did a poll on our Instagram, and those that don't like oral sex a lot of them referred to like just the gross factor. Just I don't want his head down there. I don't like, and I understand like a lot of women are, and men too, probably they're raised by parents who always like, were so adamant, you wash your hands every single time you use the bathroom or touch stuff. Cause that is like a ugly part of your body, like a gross part of your body. And that kind of gets ingrained and it's really hard to get out of that. But let's say you kind of want to change that. You want to be a little more okay with your own body's natural fluids and scent. Are there, like, I've heard you give this tomato analogy once, like let's say you didn't like tomatoes. Like, can you expound on that a bit? How can someone like, okay, I want to do it. What are some practical steps they can take to get more comfortable with their body?
Yeah. So anytime we're trying to change the way that we think about things, our brain's not going to make a big jump. So we're not going to go from like, oh, I hate oral sex to I love oral sex overnight. Like it's just not going to happen. So we have to do it in like little step-by-step increments. So let's say you don't like tomatoes. Okay. Can you look at a tomato?
Yep. I probably can.
Can you touch it?
Mm-hmm.
Can you slice it open? Can you touch the inside of it? Can you smell it? Like all of these things are basically growing your tolerance towards it.
Right.
Can you taste it and not like throw up? Right.
Right. Or like touch your finger to it, like touch your finger to your mouth.
Touch your finger to it, touch it to your mouth. Like just basic little, like just baby steps. So if oral sex is not in your repertoire now and you want to make it, start small. You don't have to go from 0 to 100 overnight. Just really, even maybe you're not able to, like if you're going to perform oral sex on a man or a woman, but even just taking it in your hands with maybe some lube or something and touching and getting more comfortable, looking at all the different parts. Can you identify your partner's genitals like in a lineup?
Yep, exactly. Do you know it that well?
Do you know it that well? Right? Because most men know their genitals that well. Most women do not. And then do you know your partners that well? We should get to know our partners that well. And so even if you're not ready to, fully engage with your mouth and tongue, if you can just start small and just take it one little step at a time, I think that can really be helpful.
That's good. Good. Great.
And then one of the biggest things I think with women is position and control.
All right.
So, women don't necessarily want a man shoving his penis down her throat. So, making sure that you're in a position where you are in control as the woman. So whether that's, you on top or kneeling over him or different things, we can talk more about positions in a minute, but that's a big part. Also men making sure you're not pushing her head down. Just sit back and enjoy it and let her take control over that. That can be a thing. But again, that's the mindset piece too of, a lot of times if a man is over her, trying to force his penis in, then that can feel very demeaning. So when a woman can go on top or being over him, then she has more control, and then it maybe doesn't feel quite that way. So position can matter on that.
Gotcha. How about positions for cunnilingus, man giving oral sex to the woman?
Yeah, there's lots.
I think some men get concerned about like their neck in the right position, like get sore or whatever. But
that's fine. Like if you are finding that you're in a position where things are getting a little sore, change positions.
Right.
Like you can stop and change positions. It's totally fine. Yeah. But probably the most common is, the man, like the woman laying on her back and the man between her legs. But another one is the woman sitting on his face. Another one is even like the woman on her hands and knees and the man under. There's lots of different positions. I mean, whatever works for you and is comfortable that you can do for a long-ish period of time, I think is totally fine.
Yep. I just want to add, you do it for as long as needed. Like this is, again, back to what you said at the very beginning. This can be a very loving, selfless, giving act. So,
but if you need to change positions, it's okay too.
Do it. And use pillows too if you need to help prop up things and body parts. Yeah.
Definitely. That, like, whatever is going to work to make it comfortable for the both of you, then do that.
They sell positioning pillows designed for oral sex. So
they do. Yeah. They sell whole furniture for it.
Yes, they do. Yeah.
So if that's what you need, then do that.
Great.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think as far as like the husband not giving, most of the time it's, again, smell and taste. But also just maybe not feeling confident in them knowing what to do.
Yeah.
Wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. Yeah. Like, okay, now I'm here. Now what?
Right. Yeah. So my best recommendation for that is Ian Kerner's book, She Comes First.
Excellent book.
Gives you all the information you need and all the tips and tricks, and so that you can be confident in performing on your wife.
Just one tip that helped me reading that book is just taking it slow. Like you don't need to rush things or anything. And real life sex is different than Hollywood sex. There's a lot of talking and communicating going on, and probably giggling and laughing too.
Yes,
so like
definitely.
Like, it's okay to like, how's this?
Yes. And,
talk.
Both of you should be communicating with each other throughout these entire processes. So, if you're enjoying it, saying so, or at least, moaning, making good noises, right? If it's hurting or it's not working, it's really good to say that too, or saying what you want instead. Other partner, don't take it personally. Just use it as feedback of what not to do and try something different.
Yep. It's a team sport. Make it
totally
be a team. Yeah,
totally. Okay. Moving back to the wife that won't receive, and I'd say the husband who won't receive too. Again, I think it comes back to like body image or not being comfortable with your own body. There's so much with that, but I think that's probably the big part of it is when they just don't feel comfortable with their body, or there's like either sex or abuse or trauma.
Yeah.
is usually a big part of it. And what women too, Ian Kerner also wrote a book for us called Passionista.
Uh-huh.
It's all about how to pleasure a man. So if you want some more techniques for that, that's a great one to read as well.
Good. And just back on the confidence piece too.
Yeah.
This goes for any way you make love too. I think as a man, I'm thinking too much about the technique and the rhythm, and am I touching the right place? And I forget about the energy that I'm bringing.
Yes.
And does my touching and does my loving, does my eye contact, does everything convey the mood that I want to convey? And is that a cherishing, loving, adoring, honoring? Like, is that what's being communicated? Or am I like really too stuck on like A, then B, and then C? So
Right.
I think that goes both ways too. Like a lot of it is not, am I doing this act right? It's who am I and how am I portraying and conveying this through my body language, through who I am, and kind of the energy you're bringing. So if you can come with it, kind of with that excitement, that
Yes.
that from a good place, like we're going to have some fun here and I really like being with you, rather than like, I hope I memorize these steps right, or I hope you like this, and you're so worried about the outcome. It's really like your confidence and like, I don't know how to say it better than that, but like,
no,
it
totally is. And I think it's so wonderful when you can see your partner enjoying what they're doing.
Yes, absolutely.
You know, when you're connecting, like a lot of times I think we want to just go in our own little world and shut our eyes and focus on the task at hand or whatever. But when you can like open your eyes and connect with your partner in those most intimate moments, oh, that's when things get really good.
Yes. So, all right, Amanda, what are your black belt oral sex tips? Let's hear them.
Because I am the oral sex queen, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Or so I've heard.
Oh, have you? Well, I don't know that I am, but I would some black belt oral sex tips. So for cunnilingus, so on her, I would say it becomes more about teasing and that slow build rather than just going for it.
All right.
And then if you can bring her close to orgasm and then back off over and over. So we call this edging, right? So once she finally goes over the edge, it's so much stronger and longer because of all that buildup. I think that's really good. And then as far as fellatio is concerned, so most of fellatio is focused on the penis, but if you can add in the scrotum, the perineum, that little bit of skin between the scrotum and the anus, as well as the anus, that often adds a whole new dimension to the fellatio.
Awesome. Great. Thank you. Any other tips or any other thing you want to share with us about oral sex?
I just think really if you're struggling with it, understand why. And come into coaching with either me or Dan if you are, so we can help you work through it. But really understanding really what part is the struggle for you and what we need to work on to get through it. I think it can really become an amazing part of your sexual relationship.
Amanda, this has been a wonderful conversation and a lot of fun too. Thank you.
Thanks, Dan.
Where can people find you?
So they can find me on Instagram at Amanda Louder Coaching, on my website, amandalouder.com, or on my own podcast, which is called Sex for Saints.
Excellent. Thank you.
We hope that you enjoyed this episode of Get Your Marriage On. And if you did, we would love it if you would take a few seconds to give us a rating on iTunes and to share the show with your friends. They'll thank you for life. Once you've done that, you can head over to getyourmarriageon.com for more resources about today's topic and to download our amazing marriage apps. Now go get your marriage on.